How's it going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees with Alex and Ryan. So last night, lots of news starting to break about the Yankees' interest in pitching. Now, of course, we've talked about Juan Soto, we've talked about the pivots, we've talked about the prospects, but how about the pitching? How about the rotation? Right now, you got Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Nestor Cortez, Marcus Stroman, and Luis Gil and Clark Schmidt as your primary guys. But the Yankees have been interested in pitching this offseason. Blake Snell obviously going to the Dodgers. They had a good call with him, and then a couple hours later, he's like, yep, I'm going to L.A., good weather, big payday. Obviously was a good fit for Snell. They reportedly, according to a couple of people, I think most importantly, Michael Kay was the first one to break that Max Fried was in connection and was actually having a really good meeting, I think a 90-minute Zoom call with the Yankees last night or yesterday, and Corbin Burns as well. I think John Heyman came back and reported this morning. So they had calls with Corbin Burns, calls with Max Fried, and Fried's apparently went really well. He loved the Yankees. He loved what they wanted to do. He loved the plan, the strategy, whatever it is they talked about. He was all in for their game plan. The question is, Ryan, is it a pivot, or can they actually sustainably acquire a player like Fried and Juan Soto? We can talk about how they could get creative in this instance. Let's talk about it, in both instances, whether, it's a pivot or in addition. But most importantly, Nestor Cortez, 3 lefties in the rotation, doesn't seem altogether that realistic. So I do think that Nestor Cortez could be a trade option for them if they go down this route. So we'll talk about that, obviously. But Ryan, thoughts on Fried? We'll start with him first and foremost, since that's kind of that was the headliner of the whole narrative being pushed yesterday. What do you like about him? I think he's a good fit for Yankee Stadium. High ground ball rate, generates lots of weak contact. And he's been relatively healthy over the last 4 years.
Yeah, so in regards to Max Fried, he's one of the best starting pitchers in baseball in terms of run prevention. Dating back to 2020, he has the lowest ERA for any starting pitcher with at least 500 innings pitched. His ground ball rate, which you mentioned, is among the elite marks over that stretch as well. But what separates him from other ground ball pitchers, Alex, is that he maintains above average strikeout to walk rates while having an above average ground ball rate. Over the last 3 years, Max Fried is tied with Hunter Brown among qualified starting pitchers for the highest strikeout to walk rate among pitchers with a ground ball rate of at least 15%. That strikeout to walk rate was 17.6%. That's above the major league average. Fried isn't going to overpower you, but he's not going to walk guys. He's going to strike out roughly like a little bit more than the average pitcher will. He'll strike out more batters than you would more batters than the average pitcher does. And on top of all of this, he's a very deep pitch mix. He can throw 7 different pitches, a 4-seamer, a curveball, a changeup, a slider, a gyro slider, a sweeper, and a cutter as well. He's got a very, very excellent pitch mix. He is one of those pitchers. Oh, and a sinker as well. I completely forgot. He has 3 fastballs, 3 breaking balls, and a changeup. He's one of those pitchers where his pitch variety, his pitch diversity makes him so unpredictable. He can throw pitches that move in all different ways. We saw him pitch at Yankee Stadium earlier this year. He was dominant. He was able to breeze through the Yankee lineup because, again, he just mixes up everything so freaking well. And my number one concern with Fried is the fact that he's had an IL stint in every season of his major league career outside of 2017. Now, granted, some of them have been minor things, a blister. I say a concussion is a minor thing only because it turned out to be a minor thing. It was a freak accident. It wasn't something that has to do with injury proneness. But I do have some concerns about, having forearm issues and having, hamstring strains, that kind of stuff. I do wonder how the Yankees choose to address this free agency. As you mentioned, it's unclear whether this would be an alternative to signing Juan Soto or something that's in addition to signing Juan Soto. But in either scenario, you would imagine that the New York Yankees would, be able to, figure out their payroll situation if they were to sign both. They seem to be really aggressive. They seem to be looking at all options. I think they're doing their due diligence on Fried, to clarify. I don't think they're favorites for him. I'd say the Red Sox have a more desperate need for a frontline starting pitcher. I think will be a little more competitive for Fried. I think you can make the same argument for the Baltimore Orioles and the Toronto Blue Jays, who are both in the sweepstakes for Fried. It's very likely he ends up in the AL East. The 4 teams sans the Rays, so you expect to not really be in on a guy like Max Fried. They are all in on him. It makes sense. Again, ground ball guy. You talk about the fit in the AL East, the fit in Yankee Stadium. It makes all the sense in the world. It's not like he's pitching behind an elite defense either. The Atlanta Braves aren't like the best defensive team in baseball. They're good, but they're not dominant. And, they've had some really poor defenders. They had Jorge Soler playing right field. I wouldn't consider Jorge Soler necessarily a good defender. I'd consider one of the worst outfield defenders in the league. Austin Riley, consistently has been a below average defender. They have great defense at first base because they've had Freddie Freeman and Matt Olson, but, at shortstop, it's been inconsistent ever since they've lost Dansby Swanson. At second base, Ozzie Albies isn't a consistently great defender and isn't consistently healthy. So, you've had some, a lack of continuity there. The Yankees would be getting a pitcher who I think is a number one, if not a number two. And whether he's a number two or not is fully dependent on Garrett Cole's performance. If Garrett Cole's a Cy Young caliber pitcher next year, yeah, Fried's a number two. But if Garrett Cole's really good, he still might only be the second best pitcher in his own rotation if Max Fried comes over to the Yankees. That's how good he is. That's how dominant Fried has been. I'll also like to add this, Alex. If you want to make a statement, if you want to tell everyone that you're serious about being the New York Yankees, that you want to go out and win the 2025 World Series, that nothing's going to come in between you and that title, man, bringing in Soto and Fried. I mean, look, I know people are going to say Soto and Burns, but I think it's clear that Burns is going to get more money than Fried. I think Soto and Fried, if you move certain guys around, maybe you move a controllable starter instead of Nestor, maybe you do rock with the three lefty situation, move like a Schmidt or a Keel, you get a Brendan Donovan, that's a cheap bat. If you walk away with this offseason with a Soto, Fried, Donovan offseason, it's kind of hard to complain, no? Right? Like you walk away with, and you probably still have enough money to go get some relievers, bring back Tim Hill, you could sign cheap guys. I don't really care what they do with the bullpen. I don't know much. I don't care if they do. Like everyone's like, sign Tanner Scott, sign this guy's like, I kind of don't care if they spend money or not there. They just need to get people that are interesting, because when they get interesting arms, their bullpen's fine. I don't know. I think it's possible they get Soto and Fried. I wouldn't consider it likely. I'm not sourced on this. I'm just kind of spitballing here. But it does kind of remind me of that Judge Rodon thing when they brought in Judge and brought in Rodon. I know Rodon's contract hasn't aged particularly well, so there are going to be people who are saying, well, that's terrible. We don't want that. But I think Fried's a little bit of a different pitcher in the sense that he's not as injury prone as Rodon, and he's also the best damage preventer in the league. He has the lowest expected weight on base average on contact in baseball since 2022, minimum 1,000 pitches thrown. So he's elite at damage prevention. Alex, I think he's a perfect frontline option for this team.
I agree. And looking through this rotation, kind of objectively, Garrett Cole coming off a year where he pitched 95 innings, rather. I think we can expect Garrett Cole to rebound. That's an anomaly in a very large sample size of consistency for Garrett Cole. So, you're not going to need as much bullpen support with some of the ideas I have in my mind. This is a best case scenario for what it's worth. Like, Garrett Cole bounces back. Let's say he pitches over 150 innings. Less bullpen you need for his starts, or just in general, because, if you're supplementing Garrett Cole with a lesser option, you're going to have to use more of your bullpen long term. Then you look at, obviously, you get Max Fried. He's going to give you 6+ innings a game on average. He's pitched over 165 innings in 3 of his last 4 seasons. I'm not really worried about his health. His strikeouts are pretty much around his career average. Ground ball rate's up. Everything looks pretty good from a statistical standpoint. And one of those elite lefty arms plays well in Yankee Stadium. I think, look, I'm okay offloading, like if you could offload Marcus Stroman's contract this year by packaging him with a prospect, just get rid of him. You can basically, all you have to pay is $10 million for Max Fried, like theoretically speaking, financially. That is a move I would make. And then you have Stroman coming off the books in 2026 anyway. So you're just replacing that contract that already exists. 2026, you're just basically moving that money over to Fried long term. And if you can manage to offload him this year, you can free up that money now. And I'm okay packaging him with a prospect to get rid of him, because this team is already chock full of prospects, Ryan. Like if you're going to promote Caleb Durbin, you're going to promote Jason Dominguez, you already have Luis Gil, you have Austin Wells, you have Anthony Volpe, you still got Ben Rice waiting in the wings. You have all these young players. How many teams have this much young talent on their roster that have been homegrown? Not many. Not many teams have this amount of homegrown talent that are good talent. Maybe they do have the homegrown talent, but not all of them are freaking good. The Yankees have a lot of young talent being ushered in and obviously playing prominent roles. So you can afford it long term in addition to Juan Soto. Obviously, like you said, you could trade a Clark Schmidt. You could trade somebody if you want to go get like a cheaper bat, like a Brendan Donovan. Maybe you want to trade one of those guys for a Nico Horner if he was available, because he's only making $11 million. He could play second base. He could play shortstop. He could do all these things for you. I mean, obviously, Volpe is a long-term shortstop in this instance, but maybe there is a world where they would move Volpe to second base and Horner to shortstop, where that defense is even better. The whole world becomes your oyster in this instance, but Fried is a perfect fit for Yankee Stadium. I don't know if this is a pivot to Juan Soto. Maybe it's a part of a larger plan, but if I'm the Yankees and I'm trying to court Juan Soto, and one of the biggest problems we had was our starting pitching in the World Series, because Rodon was bad in most of his postseason starts. Not to say Fried has been like an excellent postseason performer, but he has 67 innings of postseason performance. He had a Game 6 absolute gem against the Astros in the 2021 World Series. Like, he has experience in big critical moments. You can trust him. You can lean on him. And also in like do or die situations, like he would want Fried over Carlos Rodon, like objectively. So let's talk about this, Ryan. What if you did something like this? What if you packaged Nestor Cortez, and to take Nestor, you also had to take Stroman to a team that needed a couple starting pitchers? And maybe you got a bullpen piece in return. You gave up Stroman, and you gave up Cortez. You got a bullpen piece back. You get Fried, and then you still have Luis Heel and Clark Schmidt and Rodon. So you have 5 men right there. And maybe you just look at Will Warren as your number 6 or supplement next season, coming off some experience. Is that something that you would consider? Is that something that maybe could be realistic?
That's a great question. It depends on what Marcus Stroman's value is. Now, I will say in terms of Marcus Stroman's value, has it trended upward or downward during free agency? It's something you do track, right? Like you look at what players in his position group are getting and whether that negatively or positively impacts his value. You say Kikuchi got a 3-year, $63 million deal. Blake Snell, 5 years, $185 million. Matthew Boyd, 2 years, $29 million. Frankie Montas, 2 years, $34 million. I would say that bodes well for Marcus Stroman, who had a better ERA than he had a better ERA, I believe, than Frankie Montas. I know that off the top of my head because Montas was 4.84. Granted, Montas has way more upside than Stroman because he throws harder and has better stuff, all that stuff. But Matthew Boyd hasn't completed a full season since 2019. Alex, in 2019, I was the start of 2019. I was a freshman in high school. I'm a sophomore in college now, so you know what I mean. Like it's a little bit. It's been a while. I'd also like to add in regards to Yusei Kikuchi. This is a guy who had a below average ERA in the 2024 season. I really coveted Kikuchi, but it does indicate that teams perhaps are willing to pay a lot more for starting pitching than people think, and that obviously affects the Max Fried market. That's why I say I don't consider it likely for the Yankees to sign both Max Fried and Juan Soto. I do believe there is a team that would say, screw it, here's 6 years, $180 million. And at $30 million AAV, if the Yankees already have Juan Soto, unless, again, they were able to move Stroman, I'd have a pretty hard time believing they'd be able to land Max Fried. So that's the only reason why I say it's not likely. But, again, in the scenario where you could maybe move Stroman, hey, in the same way that it bodes poorly for the Yankees' chances of having the highest offer for Max Fried if they sign Juan Soto, it does bode well for their chances to be able to move Marcus Stroman because teams are seemingly paying a lot more money for pitching. If you traded Nestor and Stroman, you'd probably have to eat some of the money for both these pitchers because I believe Cortez is projected to make around $7 million in arbitration. Stroman is set to make $18 million towards a luxury tax. That's $25 million of money. I don't think a team is willing to pay $25 million for 2 starters of Stroman's caliber and Nestor's caliber. Nestor's pretty solid. I don't think Nestor's a bad pitcher. I think if you ate like $6 million, $7 million of that, and as you mentioned, just get a reliever in return, ask for nothing crazy, you free up $18 million. Yeah, you could get Max Fried with that money. Max Fried, let's say he costs you $30 million. Realistically, your payroll goes up $12 million. You had $12 million, let's say $50 million for Juan Soto at $62 million. All right, you've got $62 million of added payroll. You're hovering right under, if I'm not mistaken, that $300 million threshold. That you could still do a little something. Maybe you bring in a Carlos Santana, whatever it may be. The Yankees have to be cognizant of the fact that their payroll is going to be very high this season if they sign Juan Soto. If they want to compete in 2025, they have to run a pretty high payroll. It's going to be a couple of years until they can start shaving off some of that money. Obviously LeMahieu's money comes off the books after 2026. Hicks's money comes off the books after 2025. Let me just want to double check some of the money coming off the book as well. You have obviously the player option for Stroman if you don't move him. He comes off the books. You have to pay Weaver, which is a little bit of a concern, but I'm fine with that. You can move arbitration eligible players. You still have a lot of cheap players. Just having $25 million come off your payroll. In terms of committed money, I think they're at like 146 for 2025 or 2026. My point is a lot of these contracts are coming off. Stanton comes off the books after 2027. That's $25 million Yankees can open up. Rodon comes off the books a year after that. Cole comes off the books a year after that because the Yankees didn't pick up that 5th year. So in the next 3 to 4 years, the Yankees could free up, that's $100 million basically right there, right? In terms of Hicks, LeMahieu. That's a lot of money. So sign Soto, sign Fried. You can make it work. We'll see, though. We'll see.
It's going to take a lot of creativity, but listen, the Yankees, they made it to a World Series with what they had last year. If they really put in the work this offseason, they bring back Soto, they get creative, offload Stroman's contract, manage to get a Fried, manage to get a Walker, or even go get if you walked away with this offseason, Ryan, with Soto, Fried, and Carlos Santana, would you be happy? I'd be pretty happy with that. You have a true number 2 ace that could be a supplement insurance policy, 30 years old, to Garrett Cole. If anything happens to him, you have a really good player to step in and fill the gap there. We expect Luis Hill to take steps forward. We expect Clark Schmidt to rebound. He was excellent before the injury that knocked him out for like 2 months. I do think this team is positioned quite nicely to, if Brian Cashman just puts the cards in, you bring back Soto, you get creative, you do what you got to do, this team will be right back in the World Series next year, right? They will be right back there, and they will be with the Dodgers competing at the highest level. And maybe they have their number that week. That's all it takes sometimes. Better defense, better base running. That number 2 starter in Max Fried, who has postseason experience, he's been to a World Series. Like, those things matter in the long term. Yes, you may have to lean on some youth and Caleb Durbin or Jason Dominguez, but the truth is, you have the trade deadline too. You still have a really strong prospect pool. We're not talking about trading like a ton of prospects right now. You can still trade out of that prospect pool. Chase Hampton, Will Warren, Clayton Beater, Rafael Flores, Carlos LaGrange, you've mentioned many times to me on potential mock trades. Like, there's a lot of talent there that the Yankees, like even Roderick Arias, teams always love young shortstops and young infielders. So, this team has a ton of young talent. Ben Rice is another one you could throw into the mix if you really want to. Spencer Jones. They have talent they could trade out of their prospect pool to reinforce specific positions at the deadline next year. So you spend the money, you offload some big contracts right now if you possibly can. We've already seen, I think Mark Feinsand reported that he does not think that Stroman is in the Yankees' plans next season. If that's the case, why would he be here next season? He will probably be traded if they do not have plans for him, unless they see him as a competent, like, 6th option. But I don't see how he is a piece in this rotation if they add another arm. If they add another arm, someone's getting traded. Someone's getting moved. It's just a matter of who and why and for what. So, I don't know. Right now, I think it's kind of interesting. But I'll ask you this, Ryan. Would you prefer Corbin Burnes at $36 million at the same age as Max Fried, or Max Fried at $26 million, maybe a similar length, 6-7 year contract? Who are you going with in this instance? I know Burnes' strikeouts have been down. Obviously, Fried's strikeouts have been pretty average, hovering around his career averages. Ground ball rate's still great. Both have been pretty healthy over the last couple seasons. I think Fried had 3.4 WAR last year, and Burnes had 3.7, so similar values, but $10 million less for Fried. I think I'd probably lean in that direction. The Yankees need an elite lefty starter who generates a ton of ground balls in Yankee Stadium. I think I'd lean in that direction just because of the price. But what's the better player?
Yeah, I mean, I think Corbin Burnes is a better pitcher than Max Fried. The reason I say that is because he's going to rack up more innings. And look, we're talking about so we're going to use over the last 3 seasons, just because I know Burnes was a lot better in 21 and 22 than he was in 2022 or 23 or 24. So that's unfair to lump that in. That's a 75 ERA minus, which is a 3.08 ERA. The only reason I'm using adjusted ERA is because these 2 pitchers did not pitch in the same team, so they have different home ballparks. You want to adjust for different home ballparks and make sure that you are factoring that in. My Max Fried Fangraphs page was not loading, but now it is. I apologize. He had a 67 ERA minus and a 2.80 ERA, so there is a run prevention gap between Burnes and Fried. I don't want to deny that. But you're also getting a lot more innings. 202, 193.2, 194.1 compared to 174.1, 77.2, 185.1. So, you're talking like 20 more innings and, 20 more innings of slightly worse ball. Like, I'll take it, all right? I'll take the higher volume, the guy who can pitch 6-7 innings because that helps your bullpen. And, I think there's a reason why Corbin Burnes is going to get more money than Max Fried. I think that's the best way to put it, right? Like, there's a reason why one player will be more expensive than the other, and it's because one player is better than the other. Burnes is also a year younger. That plays a role into this for me. Burnes is going to be his age 30 season. Fried in his age 31 season. Burnes does not have an extensive injury history. Fried does. And the last thing I'd like to note is I think, yes, the stuff plus scores have gone down every single year from 2021 to 2024 by an amount, and so has the strikeout rates. And I don't want to deny that. I don't want to, be ignorant of that fact. But something I would like to mention is that towards the end of the season, Burnes adjusted his cutter and he started throwing more of a sweeping slider. And over his last 5 starts, his stuff plus shot up to 133. The cutter stuff plus jumped up to 147. The slider stuff plus score jumped up to 140. Over those 5 starts, he had a 1.20 ERA. He struck out 27.7% of batters faced. He was excellent. And then he followed that up with an elite start in the postseason, where in that wild wild card game, he was utterly dominant. I believe he allowed 1 run across 8 innings pitched. A ridiculously good start against the Royals team, who we know was very scrappy. I think that's why he didn't strike out that many batters that day. That team doesn't really strike out. We've seen that. He in my opinion is one of the 5, 6, 7 best starting pitchers in baseball. Fried's in like that top 10 to 15 range. To me, the best way to put it is I fear that Max Fried is the Steven Strasburg to Corbin Burns' Garrett Cole, if that makes sense. Steven Strasburg was the second best pitcher on that free agent market. Very extensive injury history. Very good pitcher, though. And then we all know how that contract went. Garrett Cole, much better pitcher than Corbin Burns was at the time of hitting free agency, but the more durable option, the more expensive option, the perceived, he's too expensive, maybe we shouldn't go out and get him. And guess who's been the best investment? Garrett Cole. I oftentimes look at the best player on the market and say there's a reason they're going to get paid more, and people overlook that, right? It's kind of like when people go, spread the wealth, why do you want to pay Juan Soto that much money? Because he'll be the best investment of that group. The same way Bryce Harper was the best investment of his free agent class. The same way Manny Machado is probably the second best investment of his free agent class. If you look at the long-term or long-range planning, every single owner who didn't pay Bryce, if every owner could see the production that Bryce Harper has provided the Philadelphia Phillies and look and re-up their offer, or go back in time and change something, every single owner would go back and offer him $360, $390, $400 million for 13 years, ensure that they have him on his team. I'd argue for Garrett Cole, if the New York Yankees knew the production that they were going to get from Garrett Cole over those 9 years, or the Dodgers, the Angels did, I think the Dodgers, the Angels would have upped their bids. I think the Yankees would have gone to $330, $340 million. That's how good these kinds of players can be. And so far, Alex, $40 million a year for Aaron Judge, is it as bad as it was like, that's really expensive, that's rich for my blood? There are some people who wouldn't have paid him $360 million for 9 years. And I'd say it looks pretty freaking good right now. He looks much better than a $40 million a year player. How about Shohei? It's $700 million. $47 million a year towards luxury tax. He's not that good. Yamamoto, right? We're like, you can always spread the wealth of Yamamoto. I would argue that Yamamoto will be the best investment any team makes in the free agent class on the pitching side of things. He's that good. So the top guys are always the best guys. I'm not saying they always age the best, but if you look at who are the guys you look back on and go, damn it, we should have gotten that guy, it's always the best guy on the market. It's never that 2-year, $30 million contract. Those guys come and go. It's generational stars. They're forever. I don't think Burns generational per se, but I do think he's a considerable gap. There's a gap between him and Fried, and there's a reason why they're going to be paid accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that the projected contract is $10 million less per season for Fried. I just think for the Yankees situation at the moment, they have to go for that. They obviously, just financially, they can't do it.
Absolutely,
they could, but let's just be realistic. Kyle Steinbrenner is not going to do it. But I do think having a great lefty number 2, that's what they wanted in Rodon. They whiffed massively on that deal. They shot themselves in the foot, and not because we didn't think Rodon was going to be good. But for some reason, the injuries in his first year, last year, he pitched a lot of innings, he just wasn't efficient. His fastballs just lost a lot of life. Slider still seems to have life, but he's very emotional, Carlos Rodon, and I think that being a Yankee, sometimes that doesn't play well because fans get on you, they boo you, they criticize you, and that just comes with being a New York media market player, and sometimes I think that gets in his head. We saw him, how excited he was, and he was striking out guys left and right against Cleveland, and then he got shot in the foot, and he beat himself up because he's an emotional roller coaster during games is his worst enemy, because he's super confident, in a second he gets a hit, something happens, there's an error on defense, a double in the left field line, and he falls apart. And it's like, okay, that mental fortitude sometimes is compromised. So maybe he can turn that thing around. Maybe it'd be good for him to follow the Garrett Cole method. Every pitch, strikeout, you can get hyped in a big moment, but forget about it. Amnesia. You got to go right back up there and act like the game has just started. Everything, every pitch, every single at-bat is its own individual battle, and you got to move through that. And sometimes that comprises of a much more successful outing than just one bat back getting excited, whether it's a second, third, fourth inning. You got to ride into the whole outing, knowing you're going to dominate, but not get shook if something happens. So, that's what separates good from great. Pitchers that can bounce back from maybe inconsistent inning, maybe they work themselves out of trouble, whatever it might be. Rodon had a lot of trouble with that the last year and in 2023 as well. So, if the Yankees do get free, they trade Nestor or whatever, get rid of another lefty, they're going to be much better off, obviously. I am a little bit concerned about the bullpen. I think it would be great to bring back Tommy Kahnle on a relatively cheap deal. He was extremely efficient last year. You bring back Kahnle, bring back Tim Hill. You can find, Luke Weaver's projected to be your primary closer next year at this moment. Clay Holmes, obviously, I mean, he blew a lot of saves. He also had a lot of saves, but listen, like, you can make up those saves with other people. You can make up those saves in other ways. It's the blown saves that are not good, very problematic. So the Yankees got to fix that. But, just want to give you guys a little bit of insight into where we're thinking when it comes to Burns, Fried. Obviously, Burns is a lot more unrealistic, but I think that Fried is a possibility if the Yankees get creative and offload Marcus Stroman. I think that's the only way they can make this work in addition to signing Juan Soto is if they get rid of Stroman's contract. They could justify Fried in addition. But if they don't get rid of Stroman's contract, I don't see how they can do both and make a couple other improvements. So I think that we will probably wait to see what happens with Soto, and then we'll see how aggressive they are in the immediate aftermath of that decision. So hopefully they get Soto and they can make a couple of decisions quickly, after that. But always happy to give you guys some insight into what's going on and the rumors at the moment. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Make sure to like and subscribe as always, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.
Perfect.